Hello, and welcome to the first edition of Cast on Whiskey. I'm your host, Dave, and I'm going to be taking you through a journey in whiskey. I basically started drinking whiskey more seriously probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Um, my preference started out with bourbons, but certainly from there I decided to try some scotches, and the one that I'm going to review today, the Macallan 12, is one of the first single malt scotches that I've tried. I actually started out the very first scotch that I tried was a blended scotch, um, and that's the blended scotches. There's some that are really smooth, so especially if people are starting out as whiskey drinkers, it's probably a good one to start out with. The name of the brand was Chivas Regal, Chivas Regal 12. My father used to get a bottle every year from the priest at his parish. That was awful nice of him. And then one year he actually got him a bottle of the Royal Salute, which is in the blue bottle. They still make that. Wonderful whiskey. But graduated into some, as I said, I moved up into some single malts. And this was the first single malt that I'd ever tried. I was really impressed with the smoothness of it and just the flavor profiles that this had. This is a Speyside whiskey. So typically, just to give you a rundown, there were different sort of whiskey producing areas in Scotland. And in the Speyside, the characteristic of the Speyside whiskeys is they tend to be a little sweeter because they go a little heavier on the sherry. So it's going to vary depend upon the distillery. What type of sherry casks they use, because some of them use different ones. The most typical one would be an Oloroso sherry cask, and then there's also Pedro Jimenez. The Pedro Jimenez casks are more expensive because the Pedro Jimenez sherry is also more expensive, and that tends to impart a little sweeter flavor. If you've ever had sherry before, I recommend trying it. I have some Pedro Jimenez here actually, and every once in a while I want to do some non-whiskey spirit reviews because there are other spirits I do drink, but the primary is of course whiskey. But I would recommend trying sherry, especially if you're getting into Scotch whiskeys and you like sherried whiskeys, because you're getting the flavor of the sherry in the casks is actually being imparted into the whiskey. So why not try the source, right? And so anyway, the scoring system that I'm going to do is from 0 to 100. I would hope that there's no no zeros out there. But if there is a zero, I'm not going to bother reviewing it for you. That would mean that it's just complete crap and it's not even worth it. And I'm not in the business of doing reviews to just stick it to companies that I don't like. My point of all this is to try and hopefully educate people out there and just give it's another man's opinion on what the tastes and smells are of the whiskey. And also, hey, should I drop $100 or whatever on this bottle of whiskey, just as an example? I'll try to tell you that, and you may differ with me. Some people are going to say, it was $100, you said it was worth it, but it wasn't, or vice versa, and that's okay. Everybody has a varying taste profiles and everything else that they have, or taste preferences, I should say, from anybody else. And it's at the end of the day, it's your money, your palate, right? But I'm going to try to be honest, as honest as I can with all these whiskeys. But at the end of the day, it's still my opinion. It's not a solicited opinion. I bought all of these bottles myself. Right behind me is my liquor cabinet, and I have quite a few whiskeys in here, but over time, I'm going to build up more, and hopefully, if I get more and more subscribers here, I will get some more for you, and review them for you so that you can try them. There's some very exciting things out there going on with whiskeys and some experimentation that's going on. Some people like that, some people don't. I want to try as much variety as I can. I want to try as much as I can get my hands on. So some stuff out there it's pretty cost prohibitive, but in general, I don't mind spending every once in a while something on a really nice bottle that's a little more expensive, and I've got some of that in my cabinet. as well, and they will be reviewed. So, as I said, 0 to 100 in the scoring system. Between 90 and 100, it's indispensable, in my opinion. You've got to have it in your cabinet. Anywhere between 80 and 89 is going to be very good, good to very good. You should probably at least give it a try once. Probably have some in your cabinet as well. Anything that's below an 80, you probably shouldn't even bother with it. Life's too short to drink so mediocre whiskey. The beauty about whiskey is because there's so many distillers out there all over the world, and now we've even got other countries that you never heard of producing whiskey are producing whiskey now, like India, for instance. I haven't tried the Indian whiskey, but it's on my list, and I'm going to try it because I at least want to see, have an open mind and see if I like it. So, there is a wide variety of price points that are out there. And I can tell you, you can find some really good whiskeys, good everyday sipping whiskeys that are in the $30 range, $30 or less. And I'm actually going to review some of those and hopefully have a special episode where I can go over, the top 5 whiskeys for, 30 or under. And also, the best whiskeys for beginners. If you're going to give somebody who's just starting out in whiskey, there's some whiskeys that are going to be better than others as a beginner whiskey. And to that end, let's talk about the Macallan 12. So the Macallan 12 actually would be on my list of top 5 whiskeys for beginners. And the reason for that is that in general, this is a very smooth whiskey. And the reason for that, of course, is, as I said before, this is a Speyside, which means there's going to be some heavier sherry notes than, say, if you have an Islay whiskey, which is going to be more heavily peated. There's going to be more of a woodsy, smoky feel to it, and taste, I should say. And so this is going to be a little on the smoother side. This is a 43% ABV, which means it's 86 proof. So that's pretty common for a Scotch. I mean, there are some that I've seen that are 40%. And believe it or not, actually, in Europe, the ABVs tend to be a little bit lower. You could find some that are whiskeys that are 43% in the States, for instance, that if over in Europe, they sell it at 40. So there's some minimum ABV requirements here in the United States. So we tend to be a little bit, I think with that we benefit from that because I think the higher, a little bit higher ABVs tend to be a little bit better. And I have a preference for cask strength to some degree and the reason why I like cask strength is that you can start at a higher, say over 100 proof, and then you can get your water and, kind of put a couple of drops in there and you can dial it down slowly to draw out more of the flavor profiles because water in some whiskeys will bring out different flavors and different notes. Others won't. It just depends. For this particular review, I am not going to use water. I do have a water dropper, and I do use it, and there'll be other reviews for other whiskeys that I would do that. But in this particular case, I'm going to drink this neat. I'm not going to bother with the water. I just want to do a basic review with this. So just a little bit about the whiskey or the producer itself. This is a very well-known name. I mean, even people that have not been into whiskey have heard the name Macallan, Glenlivet, and Glenmorangie. Those are the 3 top distillers in the world for single malts whiskey. So that doesn't always equate to quality, but in the case of Macallan, it certainly does. I've tried a few of their products. I have another product that's in my cabinet, which I'm going to review, which is the 15-year Fine Oak. But there are others now. There are non-age statement whiskeys, which we'll get into some of that later on, because that seems to be the trend for whiskeys now in Scotland in particular, but also here in the United States. I shouldn't just say it's in Scotland, but they're moving away from age statement whiskeys and more towards the non-age statement whiskeys. And there's some controversy surrounding that, and we're going to go over that at some point in my website. I'm going to have an article about that at some point. I'm still in the middle of trying to get that done. But basically, in a nutshell, a lot of producers are starting to go to the non-age statements, and there's a variety of reasons for it. They're giving the primary reason as the fact that, look, there's only so much old aged stuff that's left because of the huge demand globally, which there is. The demand is really up for whiskey. Whiskey's very hot. And so because of that, they have to continue to produce whiskey. I mean, they're a business first and foremost. And so this means that they're going to have to blend older whiskeys with newer whiskeys. And that's generally what a non-age statement whiskey is. But also the non-age statement whiskey is not going to tell you what ages those whiskeys are. And so I don't want to get too much into that subject right now because we could spend an entire hour talking about it. But I will definitely have an article sometime, hopefully soon, to address it in more depth. But just keep in mind if you hear someone say NAS, that means non-age statement, and that is definitely the direction that the whiskey industry as a whole worldwide is going towards. But that does not mean that they're completely eliminating age statement whiskeys. And this Macallan 12 is one of the staples in the Macallan family, along with the 18, the 15. And they have some other offerings that are non-age statement. One of them is the Edition 1, Edition 2, and Edition 3. Edition 3 is out right now. You can probably get Edition 2. 3 is widely available. Edition 2 you can probably find if you search a little bit. 1, you probably are going to have a hard time finding that. So every year they put out a new one. I think Edition 4 is supposed to come out pretty soon. But anyway, this has been aged in a sherry cask, sherry oak cask, minimum of 12 years. So just so you understand, Scotland has a law that when you put an age statement on the bottle, you have to put in the youngest whiskey that's in there. And that's part of the reason why the non-age statement whiskeys don't put one on there, because that would mean that they would have to put the youngest whiskey on there. So let's say they mix a 4 with a 15. Well, they would have to put that it's 4-year-old whiskey. So Scottish law kind of restrains you in that. But anyway, this is a minimum of 12. And it's, as I said, it's in a sherry cask. Macallan gets their sherry cask from a place called Jerez, Spain. So I believe this is the Oloroso sherry, which is the most common cask that you can get. Although you will see some others, as I said before, that are Pedro Jimenez, and you'll see it referred to as PX. That's short for Pedro Jimenez because the Jimenez is with the X. But this is a common offering. You're going to find this in a lot of liquor stores. It's not going to be very hard at all to find this. This is the flagship, if you will, of the Macallan line. So anyway, let's get right to this. You can see that the color on this is a little bit of a caramel color to it, a little bit darker than some other whiskeys maybe. Not quite as dark as some bourbons. But, you don't want to get too hung up on color, because color can be deceiving. I've had some whiskeys that are very, very light have been excellent. So, and some distillers that are out there, Macallan isn't one of them, but there are some distillers out there that are so focused on the color, they're actually putting artificial coloring in here to make it look this way. So you kind of want to watch out for that. But Macallan is very reputable. They don't do that. So the color that you see in here is strictly from the aging in the cask. And what happens is that how you get that and how it gets imparts the sherry flavor is, these casks are used. They've had sherry in them that have been aging for a variety of years. They buy them from these sherry producers, and then that's when the whiskey's distilled, they put it in there. So as time goes on over the years, the temperature changes. So you've got expansions and contractions, right? And then when you have the expansions, the whiskey goes into the wood, basically, and there's still, even though the sherry was empty, there's still sherry in the wood itself. It's soaked into the wood. And so that wood flavor, the oak flavor, as well as the sherry, will get imparted into the whiskey. And then over time, you're going to get a color. Because if you were to look at freshly distilled Macallan, before it goes in the barrel, it's clear. It's a clear spirit. It starts out clear. So over time, you get this color. It's not artificial, just so you know. So I'm getting a little bit of an alcohol up front, nose. I've got this caramel smell, which is wonderful. If you love caramel, you're gonna. There's some apple notes, maybe dried fruit notes in here. A little bit of vanilla. Oh yeah, now I just took a second swift and there's more vanilla in there at this time. But definitely nice, sweet smelling. Let's take a swig. So up front, I get a little bit of alcohol. I get that caramel again. It's almost like a caramel and fruit, caramel apple, a little bit of citrus, and maybe a little bit of like a baked bread taste to it. And it gets this it finishes with the sweetness. I love it. And like I said, very smooth. You get a little bit of the alcohol taste in there. There may be a little bit of burn in the back of your throat, but it's not obnoxious. This is a very good sipping whiskey. This is what I would consider to be an everyday sipping whiskey, for sure. The price point on this is about $59.99, depending upon where you are. In the United States, it's a pretty common price. Perhaps in Canada and some other places, it'll be probably a little more expensive. But while not the cheapest whiskey, it's also reasonable, I think, for what you get, which is 12 years. And just a very smooth, enjoyable whiskey. I mean, I can see myself, sitting in my chair, which I have a chair and we have a fireplace right next to it, and just, curling up with a book and just, just enjoying this. It is just a wonderful whiskey. I'm going to give this a 93 out of 100. I just think that it is a go-to whiskey, a staple whiskey. Even non-whiskey drinkers, if you have them over and you pour some of this for them, they're going to be like, wow, this is actually pretty good. Because let's face it, I mean, whiskey can be a little intimidating, especially if somebody's not used to drinking stronger spirits. People that are maybe, wine drinkers or beer drinkers. And I drink wine too. I've got wine in my cabinet. It's not that I just drink only whiskey. It's just whiskey happens to be my favorite. But, people that are usually, I mean, you're in a 13% alcohol situation with wines, 13 to 15. You go all the way up to 43%. Well, that's quite a leap. So even my wife, who's not really much of a whiskey person, she came with me to a couple of distilleries we went to in Kentucky, and she did the tasting with me, and she's like, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So she's not used to it, although I haven't converted her to a whiskey person just yet. But I'm hoping over time maybe she'll come on board. But even if she doesn't, that's her preference. I mean, that just means there's more whiskey for me, right? I mean, as you can see here, this is almost gone. But I will guarantee you that as this at a 93, and the fact that I love this is one of my favorites. I'm going to get another bottle. It's not even a question of if, it's just a question of when. So I would recommend that if you're tasting whiskey, that if you want to invest in it, because they tend to be good ones tend to be a little bit expensive. Maybe $15 a glass or so. It just depends on where you get them from. This is a Glencairn, what they call a Glencairn glass. And so it's specifically made for tasting whiskey. You can see that at the bottom, the glass actually opens up a little bit more. It's wider and it's more narrow at the top. And that's so that you can get your nose in there and you get more of the nose, they say, from this particular shape glass. Certainly you could do the same thing with a wide open regular whiskey glass, a tumbler, whatever you have, an old-fashioned glass even, whatever's in your house. I'm not telling you have to run out and buy this. That's really up to you. But if you're really going to, over time, maybe, as you're drinking more and more whiskey, you may want to invest. I would recommend investing in one of these, or I should say a collection of them. You want more than one, presumably. But, if you're tasting the whiskey for the first time, I think it's a good idea to put a little bit in here and do the sifting or the sniffing and actually tasting, and from there and get your own opinions of what the notes are. Maybe make some notes of it. And I will tell you that after you open a bottle, the smell and the taste could change, because you open it, oxidation gets in there, and there's some whiskeys that people recommend that you actually there's a way to slow down the oxidation process. I haven't done that with any of my bottles, but it certainly will change your opinion of it for sure. I've got one bottle in particular that I'm not going to mention right now that I'm going to do a review of soon that fell into that category. That when I first tried it, I wasn't as impressed, but then I let it sit there for like a month or so, drank it afterwards, and then I was impressed. I was like, wow, this completely changed. So it does, just keep that in mind. It does change the profile over time when it's oxidized, as well as even just sitting here in the glass. Like I could take another swig. And it changed. I got more vanilla up front rather than caramel as I did the first swig. So experiment, play around with it. I would, like I said, I would definitely get this as in your cabinet and try it out, especially if you're a beginner. And I look forward to doing some more reviews for you in the future. Take care and enjoy.